Hal, in his day, and I believe it would be high school, he recognized the challenge. He says it's one thing to pick a captain, and I'm talking here under 15. He said, what do you do to educate them, train them? And Al at the time shared a book, and I think I've shared it already, but I'll share it again. And he began a leadership training, and it was open, and Hal's on now, and I'm really glad because we're talking about you, Hal. Peter's on, and we've been talking about leadership, the importance of the uh, selecting the leaders who were authentic and value driven and served others and that kind of thing. And you brought up the point of we've got to educate them. Young kids, girls, boys, whatever age, they need leadership training. And so Hal and I have been exchanging emails with a new director of operations with girls hockey here in Calgary. Hal had named a book, and Hal, I'll get you to comment on that a bit later. But
Okay.
that particular book, Hal, this gentleman who's taken over Girls Hockey Calgary, he's worked at a private school for the past 8 years. And the book that you talked about, he has been using, and his captains, he's been using it in a different way. He didn't lead the sessions, the captains led the session. They were the ones that literally organically created meetings, and discussions, and groups. And he mentioned yesterday that book. He says he hasn't gotten it back from one of the captains that took it a few years ago. It was that good. So, Hal, I'm going to ask you now to sort of bring Peter into the picture here because Peter earlier had talked about his upbringing and becoming a leader because of the model established by his family and his father of looking after the family. And it really made sense. And I'm suggesting that all three of us here have played leadership roles. And I think we have to credit our families to that. And I think in our cases, our fathers, but in today's generations, it's going to be mothers as well, because they're assuming leadership roles.
Well, the other thing that I'll throw in real quick is that I did too that was real effective is, and I could see where it could work potentially in the youth level too, is right, if you have a U13 team, we'll say, right, or a U15 team, on that 15 team, you'll have some 14-year-olds, right? But you'll have your 15-year-olds. So I would, and I did this again at the university, and it worked out really, really well, to try to include as many people, because the more people you include, because that's the other thing that's dangerous about if you pick a captain, two assistants, everyone else feels like, well, these are the guys, they're the ones, so that's that. We had at that year we had our three captains, which there was 2 seniors and 1 junior. And then what I did was we had 5 remaining seniors. So I created what I call the leadership committee. And I said, this leadership group are for you to utilize captains. These guys, the 3 of you will be where you're going to be because you have a certain role. And these other 5 individuals are in the trenches every day, just like you are, and they could probably reach into other areas and get other insights and have a voice that can help you lead. So they would periodically meet with the leadership group, and then I would meet with all of them periodically, and then I would meet with the captains separately as well. And it worked out extremely well, and it really bonded the team, and it really brought everyone together.
Hal, I wonder if you could step in and your experience over your time and just speak to this idea of it's not just the captain or captain and assistants, and how you've dealt with it and managed to do what I think every coach should do is expanded it to be inclusive.
Yeah, good morning, guys. It's always, the captain selection or choosing of them is sort of a minefield sometimes. But, like Peter has done, I did with the high school boys for a long time. We tried a lot of different ways to select captains, and then came to the conclusion that, I started doing the leadership training for the captains, and then I realized, well, every player could actually become a leader. And, corporations spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to develop leaders. And now we're working with teenagers. And whether they're high school or now I'm going to do it with my 15 and under group this year. So what I sort of evolved to at the high school level was we would eventually pick 2 or 3 captains, or a couple of captains and a couple of alternate captains. And then I would ask them who we should include in the leadership group, like you do, Peter. And I let them pick. But if another player wanted to be in the group, I'd say, sure. I mean, because they want to have, at least be a part of the conversation about leadership in general, because that's what we're talking about for captains. And, probably what I'm doing and what Peter's doing and what your friend's doing with the Calgary girls is the most leadership training that those young people will ever get in their lives. And so I think it's really valuable. What I did with it when I didn't do it last year because that was peewees. They're a little young. Get them to sit still for more than about 3 minutes was pretty hard. But with this older group, it'll be better. And you're right. There'll be some 15-year-olds and some 14-year-olds in there. But every player can be a leader somehow or some way. And so I connected back to, what has traditionally been done is the best player is the captain. And the best player typically scores the most goals. Well, most teams only have 2 or 3 of those players. But what about all the rest of the kids on the team? And you have, when I was coaching high school, I had kids from about 5 different communities on the team. And they would kind of, create their own little tribes in the locker room. They wanted to sit next to their guys that they played youth hockey with. And there was sometimes some friction. And so we try to, deal with all those issues. But if you put somebody into a leadership position and don't give them guidance or training, it's kind of it doesn't work. I mean, I'm not talking about just hockey. I'm talking about it even in the business I'm in, the financial industry. People get promoted from sales into leadership, and they don't give them any training on how to be a leader, and it doesn't always go very well. In fact, it usually doesn't go very well. And so what I will do this year, I didn't have captains last year because the question came up. I said, well, the captain can't technically do anything during games. So captainship is about what goes on in the locker room, what goes on in practice primarily, and then what kind of leaders have you selected? How about the really good player and then the not so good player? I mean, on a skill basis, so let's just use something like, your first line center versus your third line center or fourth line center. How do you connect those kids together? The other concept I've used, which I think is strength in the locker room, strength on the ice. So the tighter your group is in the locker room, the better they're going to play as a team. But with high school kids, you have to expand the locker room to include school. And it has to include their social life away from the rink, because they're tempted to do things that they maybe shouldn't do. And most with, parties and drinking and that kind of stuff. And how does, as a team, the example I would tell them, I say, suppose you guys are all, there's a big party going on Saturday night. We don't have a game Saturday night. I know you're all on your chat phones going, let's go to the party. Maybe the captains or somebody in the group say, why don't we go to a movie instead? Not put ourselves in a position where we could get suspended from playing or get penalized. Because in today's world, there's no secrets anymore. It will come out. If you were there, there was a boy at Grand Rapids High School who went ice fishing with some buddies, and they took some pictures and posted them. And they are all holding a can of beer. And eventually it made its way back to the athletic director, and the kid was suspended for 2 years. And it happened in the season before. So not good. The rules are pretty, we hold these kids to behavior standards that most of society doesn't recognize, but that's the way it is. Those are the rules. So, and I think the captain thing is an ongoing relationship discussion. So I know, Peter, the way I do it is anybody that wants to be in the leadership group can be in the leadership group, but they all get a book and they have to do the homework. They've got, we meet I would say, let's read the first 2 chapters, make your notes, and then we'll sit down and talk. And then they'll come in and go, and you'll talk about your notes that you made. What kind of a leader do you think you are? Why? Don't tell me, tell your teammates. Now, whether or not I actually appoint captains depends on the group that I have. I mentioned last week that when I started coaching in this program, and this topic came up 2 years ago, and it was Bantams, which is what, U15, I guess. I said, who normally gets picked captains on your teams? And they said, oh, the coach's son. Well, how do you like that? I go, no, I don't like that. So I said, well, my son's 30 years old, so he's too old to play on this team. So we'll have to do something a little bit different. So we really went down to, somebody brought this up last week, which was good. I asked every one of them to give me 3 names, text me 3 names. And if they want to put their own name in, they're fine. That's, if they wanted to be a captain. And then I said, well, okay, so are we voting? And they go, well, no. We're telling you what we think, but we want you to decide. I went, oh, okay. So we kind of went that way. Last year, we didn't do it because they're peewees, and I just don't think that they're socialized enough. I don't think they're mature enough to actually do it. But it is interesting that if you watch them in the locker room, you can see who the leaders are and who the followers are. It's pretty easy. Well, at least the vocal leaders, the guys that are making the most noise, interacting the most with other players. And it was our best player who scored a lot, half our goals during the season, but was also a really great kid. And I'll be coaching him again this year. So I think every group of kids you coach, I think it's, how many captains, how do you select them, how do you develop them, how do you train them? I think how you develop them and train them should be fairly consistent, but how you pick captains per se, for me, it's different every year. And maybe that's just partly my frustration with having had some really poor captains in the past. And then what do you do about it? It's hard to undo that. So anyways, that's my thoughts on it.